How often do you leave a store feeling good about where your money went? When you shop with Dalby Farm Country Store, you're not just buying something cute or cozy. Every purchase helps protect rare and endangered farm animals. You're helping us feed, care for, preserve, and educate the community about them so they don't disappear forever. It's shopping that feels good because it does good. We don't want to see goats like Sheldon, the Arapawa Island, go extinct. Shop Dalby, where your dollars do good. Always open at dalbyfarm.com. Hello, it's Kendall. Welcome back to Barn and Soul. Today, we're talking about something that I maybe not obviously, but something that I think about a lot. The invisible, unsung, essential labor that women have always done on farms. The work that wasn't always called, quote, farming in the official books, but the work that literally kept farms alive. This episode is a mix of history, hard numbers, and stories, and yes, some personal reflection. I'll share places where the record is dry and where women's work has been overlooked, and I'll also celebrate how women have held farms together through wars, mechanization, and changing economies. I'm also going to make room for a family moment in this episode, a place to tell how Dalby's mission shifted in the early 2000s because of my mom's vision, and how now I'm carrying that forward while building some of my own little things, like this podcast, for example. There'll be a spot for that later. You'll know it when you hear it. But let's start with a little context, some fast facts that, as always, set our stage. In the 2022 Census of Agriculture, about 36% of all producers are women. So that's around 1.27 million female agricultural producers. Recent research identifies a triple burden for farm women: production work, household care, plus off-farm employment. This naturally correlates with higher stress and lower access to services. Obviously, that does depend on where you are, but this is according to the Pennsylvania State Research Roundup in 2024. And let's see here. The Smith-Lever Act of 1914 formalized what was called cooperative extension services across the U.S. So this brought home mostly female demonstration agents into rural communities to teach them about food preservation, nutrition, and home economics. This one is I find particularly fascinating. But during wartime labor shortages, so like World War I and II, women stepped into large-scale farm labor roles in organized efforts, sometimes calling themselves the Women's Land Army, or what I kind of love is farmerettes. And even when women do most of the work, land and farm decision records historically list men, meaning women's labor and leadership are often literally invisible in official data, according to academic analyses such as the Journal of Rural Studies, NASS demographic notes. Those are some headlines, but let's walk through some history and some human stories and the reason that these facts matter. It's a simple truth. Women have always worked the farm. If you want to understand agricultural life in America, don't start with the tractor, start with the kitchen and the garden. For much of history, what we call women's work on farms included food preservation, pickling, canning, curing meat, which guaranteed winter survival, dairy work, milking, butter making, resulting, also in cheese, meat processing, such as careful storage, household butchery, textile work, spinning, mending, making clothing from wool and flax, seed saving, plant care, small livestock tending like rabbits and chickens, garden production, child care, bookkeeping, and importantly, maybe most of all, being the logistical brain of the household. Primary sources like letters, diaries, and extension reports are full of women writing about hour after hour of labor at dawn and late into the night. The Library of Congress and the National Agricultural Library have collections of farm women's diaries and home demonstration records that brings this to life. And you can see yourself, just see Library of Congress, quote, farm life, image collections and USDA National Agricultural Library exhibits. It's all there. And even when women were doing a majority of the labor, census takers and official reports often recorded the farm operator as the man. That mismatch has meant decades of undercounting true roles of women on the land. So what does invisible mean? When I say invisible work, I mean, well, first, it keeps the farm functioning, but isn't counted in any official capacity in terms of production statistics. Second, I mean it requires skill and decision-making, such as seed selection, animal care, pest management, but is quickly labeled, quote, domestic. And third, it's emotionally intense. There's grief for lost animals, managing guests, mediating family conflicts, and it's all labor that matters, but where is that on a spreadsheet? It's nowhere. That's why research labels this as a triple burden. There's the production, reproduction, and then income diversification. So, like I said, it's the actual farm work, and then it's your household and child care, and then the off-farm jobs to keep the family solvent. This makes me laugh because it's my life. More on that later. On many small farms, women are the ones who notices the odd behavior when they're fed in the morning or evening. They remember the last spring that they had a similar problem, and because of that, maybe larger issues are prevented. I witnessed this year after year with my mom. She is definitely that vessel of knowledge. It's experiential. It's accumulated. It's expertise. You cannot buy it. No book in the world will make you feel like years on a small farm will. I'm sorry, it's true. But when grant applications are written or when farm loans are processed, not that I have any experience there, that expertise goes unnoticed or it's invisible. It's certainly not, to my knowledge, used in any sort of metric. So where does that leave us? And I will take this opportunity to remind us of what I mentioned before, which were the historical moments where women absolutely stepped up. And again, just because it might be invisible work doesn't mean it's invisible value. There's tons of value in all of that, whether or not the system by which we value our production or our whatever. Tons of value, but current systems don't necessarily reflect all of that when money gets involved. A lot of expertise, particularly in female farmers, it goes unnoticed. But again, the Smith-Lever Act, where women were paid in 1914 to teach nutrition, food preservation, home technologies. That was, as I mentioned in the Fast Facts section, and even the Women's Land Army during World War I and II, where women were filling these urgent farm labor gaps. I mean, my goodness, these farmerettes working in fields, canneries, packing sheds, and even post-World War II mechanization and consolidation mechanization. I mean, as farms industrialized, many small, diversified family farms disappeared. And for women, this meant the loss of autonomy and shifting roles again. And you know what? Some moved into off-farm work, and others saw their household and farm duties intensify because mechanization didn't always replace the nuanced labor women provided. In fact, I might just have to dedicate a future episode to the ways that it was almost specifically ignored. That is all to say that not all moments in history neglect women when it comes to farming. It's just that as a rule, we're not often considered. So this is where I'm going to bring it literally home. It's personal for a sec, but I mean, it's no secret. In the early 2000s, my mom reshaped this mission of Dalby Farm. Dalby Farm's been in the family since 1861. It was founded by a man named John Dalby. He had it as a chicken farm, and then for years and years after that, it would be a hobby farm. We always were home to animals. My grandpa has different licenses to even have native wildlife as pets if we wanted to, which we do not, but the point being is that we go back forever and ever, but in the early 2000s, that's where my mom reshaped the mission. She had read an article in the 80s in the Boston Globe that was all about the fact that one farm breed goes extinct every single month, and that was in the 80s. I can only imagine what that number is now. If not the same, it's definitely worse. And so knowing that we had this family farm, it sits on, significant acreage to the point that we could do something, she decided we couldn't keep this land and have this infrastructure and not pursue rare endangered farm breeds. So she spearheaded the programs. She found different networks and built different networks, both local, like with the Plymouth Plantation, now known as the Plymouth Patuxent Museum. That was our first real big connection. We were one of 13 farms to get to help the Arapara Island goat breeding program that started in 93 when the Plymouth Patuxent Museum brought breeding goats from New Zealand here, and then we got their offspring and so on and so forth. This is all my mom. And she had another job, 2 jobs actually. One was another family business that she didn't start, that she helped keep going because, her mother passed and needed to help her dad. So she had that business, and then she had her own side job, and then started the farm. And then poof, kids are growing up, getting less dependent, but oh darn, now your husband is chronically ill and needs doctor appointments and surgeries, and you're the only one. Oh, and your father, is getting older and needs more stuff. And you still have 100+ mouths to feed every day and not a whole lot of resources to ask for help or do anything much other than lean on your family. And that's where I come in. And I mean, there was no way as a teenager that I could have appreciated, what my mom had taken on at the time. The farm seemed like just a lot of work to me back then, and I didn't quite understand the emotional wins from it all. But this isn't really about that. This is genuinely just the picture of her circumstances, and we wouldn't have it any other way in terms of the commitment that these animals require and that the farming asks of us. It's more than a triple burden, is all I'm trying to convey here. We don't like to dwell to our supporters, especially, how rough some days can be and how we've had really challenging years and eras, if you will. But my point here really is that my mom has led the way. She has persevered and even inspired me to follow in the footsteps in both things she's already started and also leaning and branching out into ways that fill my cup a bit. And I guess this is a tiny piece of that effort. We don't talk about us. It's about the mission. It's about the big picture. So what are women doing now? Not just me and my mom, but what are women doing? Well, leading conservation herds of heritage breeds, which is, as I've said and will say forever, important for genetic biodiversity. They're running value-added businesses, cheese, soap, wool products, seasonal stores. That's why you go to a small farm, and it helps make them financially viable. They're organizing community education like toddler groups. What? Shout out to me. Workshops and school partnerships. All of these things are true. Yep. They're innovating direct marketing like CSAs, farmers markets. They're advocating for policy change, local zoning, farmland access, and equitable grant programs. So many are because of women. And honestly, my own story. Look at my mom. She saw the farm and turned care into curriculum and legacy into program. And I saw those things being maybe not offered to our youngest citizens, our toddlers, the ones that are coming into themselves. I now work alongside my mom and starting some new, continuing some old, working together on the existing, whatever we can do to extend the mission. I don't think we're just caretakers. I consider us storytellers and educators and animal advocates. And of course, while we're at it, here are a few extra pieces of farm history and culture that don't get enough airtime, but absolutely should. The first female county agricultural agent in the U.S. was Minnie Howell of Virginia in 1913. She taught food preservation and poultry care before women even had the right to vote. Her programs reached more than 2,000 families in a single year, all without a car or a phone, according to the National Agricultural Library Archives. Egg money wasn't just pocket change, it was power. In the early 1900s, rural women often sold eggs or butter independently. I love it. Keeping that income as a personal spending or emergency money. Many used it to buy school books, fabric, or even farm equipment when credit wasn't in their name. Source is Smithsonian Rural Women's History Project. Letters to the Roosevelt administration show thousands of farm wives pled for electricity, but this was not just for leisure, but to run freezers, water pumps, and milk separators. It cut daily labor by hours. Rural electrification in the 1930s was a women's issue. In World War II, victory gardens were largely managed by women and school children. By 1943, there were over 20 million gardens, producing roughly 40% of America's fresh vegetables, according to the USDA Historical Summary of War Food Administration, 1943. Farm women pioneered community canning kitchens. That's not surprising, but before modern food safety laws, these local hubs, often run by extension clubs, let women safely can hundreds of jars of produce for neighbors using USDA-approved pressure canners. And the rise of agritourism, well, women led it. In the 1980s and 1990s, women were among the first to turn small farms into destinations, launching bed and breakfasts, school visits, and pick-your-own operations that later inspired formal agritourism programs. Source is the Journal of Rural Studies in 2017, but I can think of several farms around here in my own area that are have some of these programs, and they were absolutely led by women, so this tracks so hard for me. One of the most enduring agricultural traditions, 4-H, originally targeted girls. The first, what they called tomato clubs in the South, 1902 to 1910, were created to teach farm girls scientific gardening and home economics, a quiet revolution in hands-on education. And women own or co-own nearly 38% of U.S. farmland today, but inherit only about 14% directly. Much of that ownership comes after widowhood, not planned succession, which is why estate planning and conservation outreach to women farmers, well, it's becoming an urgent topic, which, well, maybe we'll talk about it in a future episode. So, what's the takeaway? If you love farms, even if you're not a farmer, just notice who's doing the work. No, I'm kidding. But celebrate the women who are both visible and invisible. Support them with your attention, your dollars, dalbyfarm.com, we have a country store, and your votes. For me, walking around Dalby is an act of gratitude. It's gratitude to the women who have kept farms alive across generations. Gratitude to my own mother, who, as I said, reshaped our mission in the early 2000s. And gratitude for the women who are stepping forward now, among people like myself, to invent that next chapter. If you're listening and you have a farm woman in your life, give them an extra hug. Maybe offer to wash those eggs or sit with them while they tell a story about one of their many farm encounters. Thanks for coming along, and we'll catch you next time. If you enjoyed this episode, please share, leave a comment, maybe a question I can answer in a future episode. Subscribe to the channel, you know the whole deal. And of course, you can visit dalbyfarm.com. We do ship nationwide. Our country store has something for everybody. So I hope, and please know that all purchases, I believe it's at least 50% of each and every purchase goes directly back to the care and upkeep of this family farm. So we thank you very much. I hope this finds you well, and we'll see you next time. Oh, and don't forget to appreciate the rare and wonderful things in life.